Hey everyone, it's Dale, and I want to walk you through a Twitter 101, if you will. We're going to go over some best practices to use Twitter, some instruction on lingo, and things along those lines for those of you who may not be as familiar with it. Even if you do use Twitter, you still need to watch this and make sure you understand everything that we will be discussing in this very quick video that we'll do. So when you get started on Twitter, and I realize some of you will be starting from scratch, the first big decision you have to make is your handle, your username. So there are several things to consider when you're going through this process of determining your username. The first question to ask is your real name available? If you're like me and your name is Dale Blassingame and there are only a couple of Dale Blassingames around the world, you have a much better shot of getting your real name than a John Smith or a Maria Hernandez, something along those lines. So try, first initial, middle initial, last name, first name, first initial of your last name. Try different username combos to see if you can get something related to your real name if your full real name is not available. From there, do you have an online persona? So, do you go by a nickname? Do you have a username that has been popular or you've populated in other social networks? Consistency is always a good thing. So, if you have consistent usernames in another through other social networks, I would encourage you to continue that through with Twitter, as long as it is nothing dirty or it's nothing that's going to embarrass you regarding a username. Otherwise, I would say go for that. Finally, you might just have to get creative. Come up with a funny name. Not funny necessarily, but creative, more along the lines. One of my friends, she has a very common name, and so she says the term right on all the time. So she added right on before her last name. Think along those lines because, Twitter's been around for so long now that most of the usernames are gone, or at least the most common ones. So you do sometimes have to get creative when it comes to your usernames. The biggest thing that I can tell you is please, 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 no sexual innuendo. Big boy 69 might sound funny at the time. It will be very embarrassing if that is your username down the line. So no sexual innuendo. You also want to avoid underscores if possible. Underscores are not completely horrible in a username, but just know they're kind of hard to type, especially on mobile. So, if you can avoid an underscore and you have options without them, you want to go that way. It's not a deal breaker if you have an underscore in your name. Just know that, we should probably be looking for names without underscores. And on that same line, you really want to avoid strings of numbers. So if my username was Dale53324719, that's a problem because people are not going to remember those. Even though Twitter auto populates a lot of times when you're writing to someone, there are times where people might have to remember your user handle. So just try to avoid those numbers, long numbers if you can. 2 or 3 numbers, not a bad thing. If your name is Dale512 or something like that, that's fine. It's just once we start getting 4, 5, 6, 7, even longer, that's where problems come into play. Here's why your username is so important, because it's going to show up very high in the search rankings for your name. So, for instance, when you Google my name, my Twitter handle is usually 2 or 3 when it comes to that. So, if my Twitter handle was BigBoy69, I would be awfully embarrassed if a potential employer goes to Google me and that's one of the first things that pops up. I can tell you from experience if dealing with applicants and other things along those lines, and I've come across some embarrassing Twitter handles on people who are applying for jobs. It raises an instant red flag. So make sure your username is professional or at least individual enough to where it's not going to be embarrassing down the road when it comes to that. So now that you have your handle, now it's time to write your profile or your bio. Hopefully y'all know Twitter has 140 characters in a tweet, but in your profile you actually get 160 characters. So you have a little bit more real estate. Even though you do that, you still need to tell your story quickly, though. So I would encourage you to tell a story in your bio. So you should be telling people why you tweet what you tweet. So we'll see an example of this here in just a second. You always want to make sure and have a link in your profile. If you don't have anything to link to, you will with this class because you'll be doing your blog project. So you can link to your blog site and have that as your link. You want a profile photo that shows you, hopefully shows a little bit of your personality, but also shows you. So that's important. You want a header photo, which is the big cover photo like thing. That should be something that helps tell a story. And then you actually want to list your actual location. So I see a lot of students write SMTX or the 512 or San Marvelous or any of those things, which that's all cute and well when we're here in school. But if you go to apply for jobs, I want to know where you are. And if I don't know what San Marvelous is, again, that raises a red flag. Not as bad as Big Boy 69 username, but that still raises a flag. So all of these things together here should help tell your story. So for instance, here's my Twitter profile. You can see my username is my name, so that's good. I have a profile photo that's me and my dog out at Paladuro Canyon State Park up in the Panhandle. You see my cover photo or my profile photo there at the top, the header photo, sorry. That's one of my favorite pictures I've ever taken of the mountains in Montana and Yellowstone River there. And then now let's look at my bio. So again, this should tell the story of who I am and why I tweet what I tweet. So I say I'm a Texas social journalism professor, a 2-time Emmy winner. I'm a social consultant for the Lead Hub, which is a marketing company I work with that I helped create in San Antonio. I visited all 95 state parks, and now I'm doing all 400 plus national parks. That pretty much explains everything I tweet and why I'm tweeting about it. I tweet a lot about journalism. I tweet a lot about social media. And I tweet a lot about hiking and or traveling. So I feel like I've summed up everything very nice and neatly in that bio right there. Okay, so let's take a look at some lingo. One thing that a lot of people complain about when they get started on Twitter is that there's too much lingo. They don't quite understand what's going on. It's quite simple when you boil it down, but let's go through some of these phrases that you may not have ever heard of, or you may have seen them, but you didn't quite know what it is they actually mean when it comes to that. The first one is the @ symbol. So the @ symbol is just simply, it's a username. So mine is Dale Blassingame. So my Twitter username is @DaleBlassingame. Using the @ symbol is how you notify someone that you are talking about them on Twitter. So anytime you see the @ symbol, that just means it's somebody's username. Tweet is actually a noun and a verb. So when Twitter first started, we were under this, it was kind of the wild, wild west. We didn't quite know what to call everything. So we said we were twittering. We don't say that anymore. Now we say we're tweeting. The process of using Twitter is tweeting, but you also tweet a tweet, if that makes sense. So the 140 character product of tweeting is called a tweet. So tweet is both a noun and a verb in the Twitter world. A mention is just letting somebody know that you're talking about them. So if you were paying attention, you would have to have an @ sign to let them know that you're using their username. That gives them a notification on the Twitter app or on twitter.com or TweetDeck or whatever it is they're using. That gets somebody's attention that you are mentioning them. RT stands for retweet, and Twitter has really changed the retweet function in the past 2 years, really. It's done a complete overhaul. So some of y'all may have used Twitter long ago where you remember we had to manually retweet everything. So you would actually see tweets with RT at the beginning of it. That was to let somebody know, hey, I'm retweeting what this person said. Now with the automatic retweet, it basically just takes the other person's tweet and throws it in your feed. So we don't really see RT very much, but the process of retweeting is very important. So you do have two options in terms of how you retweet something. You have that automatic retweet, which just simply sends that person's tweet on with no commentary from you. or you have the quote tweet function, which sends that other person's tweet on, and then you have 120 characters to comment on top of it. So you have two different ways to retweet, but same basic thing in theory. You're passing along someone else's tweet and either sending that to your followers, or then you're adding content on top of it and sending it on to your followers. We hardly ever see this anymore, but this is one that throws a lot of people off when you do see it. MT stands for modified tweet. And again, you have to think back to the days where we had to actually copy and paste somebody else's tweet and then put RT in front of it. That was called a hard retweet or a manual retweet. Back then, you would sometimes run out of space because you'd have to add their username to the retweet. So you would maybe eliminate a word here or there. MT, that modified tweet, was just a heads up to the viewer or the reader that, hey, I changed a few words in this. This is generally what they said, but I've modified this a little bit. Like I said, we hardly ever see this anymore, but it's still good to know in case you ever do come across it. A hashtag at its core is a searchable term. So the hashtag is denoted with the pound sign. A lot of people use hashtags well, I won't say incorrectly, but for the purpose they're not intended for. A lot of people use them as punchlines on jokes or, hashtag just saying, stuff like that. Really what a hashtag is to group your tweet together with other like-minded tweets or tweets on the same topic, or for you to be able to search for that topic and find what other people are saying about it. The hashtag is one of the strongest tools on Twitter. It started on Twitter. The idea of a hashtag then went on to Facebook, where it never really caught on. But hashtags are incredibly popular on Instagram as well. But all that started on Twitter. And again, a hashtag is a searchable term. DM is a direct message. This is a private message, and I say private in air quotes, between you and one other person or you and a group of people. Twitter just recently allowed you to be able to group DM now. I say private in air quotes because, again, all you know is it takes one mistake or one person to release those tweets for that not to be a private conversation anymore. But in theory, a direct message is a conversation between you and one other person privately, or you and a group of other people privately through the direct message function. Now you can direct message links, you can direct message images, you can direct message GIFs. Before we couldn't do that. You could only direct message words, but now we have media options when it comes to direct messages. Favorite or heart, it kind of has changed here recently. Favorite means a couple different things. One, it's denoted by the heart on Twitter, but people use favoriting for a couple different reasons. One, it can just mean what you probably think it means, where it's just, hey, I like that tweet. It's the equivalent of the Facebook thumbs up, right? But there are other reasons to favorite stuff. I use favoriting to bookmark, and I know a lot of other people do this as well. When I see a tweet where it has an article that I want to go back and read later, I will click the heart, so therefore I have a running list of everything, of a reading list through my favorites. So some people have asked Twitter to maybe add another option, maybe a book or something, because it is a little weird sometimes when you favorite a really horrible article about like child abuse or something like that. That makes it look like you're favoriting that article, but in fact, you're actually just trying to bookmark it so you can read it later. So again, a couple of different options here when it comes to favoriting, but it is denoted by clicking the heart, and however you use it, or if you use a combination of ways with it, that's what favoriting is. And then the last one that I want to talk about is HT, and this actually has a couple different things as well. HT can either mean heard through or hat tip. Basically, this is a shout out, for lack of a better word, to whoever passed along this information to you. So if my friend Joe sent me an article and I wanted to share that with my audience, I might send out the tweet with the link, and then at the very end of it, give him an HT with his username to let people know, hey, I heard this through my friend Joe. Or, hey, hat tip to my friend Joe for passing this along to me. So a couple different options there. They both basically mean the same. It's basically giving a little round of applause to the person who passed along that information to you. Real quickly, let's talk about a couple of best practices when it comes to using Twitter. And there's no right or wrong way to use Twitter, but here's what I suggest, especially for those of you who are just starting on Twitter, or for those of you who don't really have a policy in place for how you use Twitter. By far, the most important thing is to find interesting and relevant people to follow. So your Twitter feed is what you make of it. If you're following really annoying people, you're going to be really annoyed with Twitter. So follow people who are tweeting about the stuff that you are interested in. Follow reporters who cover the stuff you are interested in. I am a member of this huge hiking and travel community on Twitter, and it really has kind of taken over my feed in a great way. Because I've made so many good friends and, even been on hikes with these people. So find those communities. They're there, I promise you. But you have to go out and find them. Your Twitter feed will be whatever you make of it. If you're just starting, I would probably caution you to listen first. Twitter does take a little learning curve in terms of, getting used to it and following what's going along. So don't think you have to walk in and just start tweeting right away. We don't do that when we go to a bar, right? If you walk into a bar by yourself, you might kind of scan the room and see if you know anybody. You might go up to the bar, maybe order a drink, kind of kick back for a little while. You don't walk in and just start screaming at people, right? So I tell students same thing with Twitter. Take a step back and listen first before you start joining in on the conversations. You want to slowly follow more people. A lot of one of the most common mistakes that people make on Twitter is they get started and they follow 1,000 people right off the bat. That makes your account look a little spammy. So what I usually recommend is following about 50 people first and maybe waiting a week or two to see if you get some followers or some of those people have followed you. Then maybe follow 25 more or follow 50 more. But you want to slowly build that follow base that you have. You want to keep that as 1-to-1 as you possibly can with your follower ratio so that you don't look spammy. So slowly follow some people. If you've already gone through and followed 2,000 people, which is usually the max follows for people with a certain amount of followers, you can go in and unfollow people. So I would caution you, if you're one of those people who is following 2,000 people and you have 150 followers, you might want to go in and kind of change who you're following and get rid of some of those so that you don't look spammy. You want to use that correct lingo, which we just talked about. Use proper etiquette. We're seeing a huge problem on Twitter with hate speech and trolling and all of these things. If that's your thing, then I would caution you to stop, first of all. But if you follow a bunch of people who do that as well, don't follow them. Again, your Twitter feed is what you make of it. And so being polite, being respectful, if you do get into a disagreement with someone, keeping it respectful or hopefully educational, or, to where somebody might actually get something out of it, where it's more of a discussion than an argument. Keep all of those things in mind. Don't tweet too much, which there's no right or wrong 100% answer on that. It's kind of the Goldilocks test, where you kind of have to find your right amount, whatever it is for you. I try to limit mine to 1 or 2 a day, but that's not a hard and fast rule. If there's something going on like South by Southwest, I'm going to be tweeting a ton during South by Southwest. So, again, no hard or fast rules on that, but just keep an eye on how much you tweet, because if you're flooding your followers' Twitter feeds, they probably are going to unfollow you at some point. I already mentioned using proper etiquette. Being polite goes into that. So, nobody wants to follow a bunch of jerks. So same thing is, do you like hanging out with your friends who are all jerks to everyone else? So be polite, and your Twitter experience will be much better. And then the final one's really important. That's find your voice. So find out what it is you want to be tweeting about. Find out how you want to be tweeting about it, the people you like to talk with. regarding that topic. These are all things that go into finding your voice on Twitter. So you follow these best practices, get your account set up, try to find a good username, set up your bio in the right way, and you'll be off and running when it comes to using Twitter.